Now moving on to advanced shapes and how to deal and work with them. First of all, what I want to do is I want to create a dartboard. I want to have a square with circles in the middle of it, a bullseye, and arrows pointing into it, maybe what they call callouts. Basically, if you remember reading your comics in the Sunday paper, how the little cartoon characters had little bubbles above their heads, well, that's called a callout of either what they're thinking or actually what they're saying. So that's what I want to do. To get started, I'm going to click on the Insert tab and go to my first shape, which is going to be a square. First I have to select my rectangle by clicking on it, and then holding down my Shift key when I click and drag, it'll create the perfect square for me. And then let go. Next, what I want to do is this square is that this is supposed to be my board. What I want to do is I want to change the square to look like some piece of wood, oak, or something like that. We can do that by selecting it, and you can either right click and go to Format Shapes, or click on the drop down arrow for the bucket and go all the way down to Textures. And then come over here and scroll through your textures, and well, there's oak. If you hover over it, you can see it pops up a little oak here. Click on it. That looks good. Next, what I want to do is I want to draw circles within it to get closer and closer to the bullseye, going from largest to smallest. So I'm going to go back to my Insert, click on the Shapes button, and select Oval, because we have to start with oval. Holding down our Shift key, I'm going to start up in the upper left-hand corner of my square. Holding Shift, I'm going to click and drag and create a circle that's not as big as the square, and then let go. And then I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to go back, well, instead of going back to the Insert tab, now that I have it selected, I'll use it here. I'll click on the Oval button, again up in the upper left-hand corner of the square, and then click and drag. Not as big as the first circle, and then do that a couple more times. And get consecutively smaller and smaller by clicking and dragging, holding down my Shift key the whole time so I can get that perfect circle. So now that I have quite a few circles here, what I want to be able to do is be able to center those. Align them so they're in the middle of the square and that they're also centered in the square. I could either do it by freehand by clicking and dragging, which I'm not really good at, or instead I can have Microsoft do it automatically and have it done perfect. To do that, I need to select all the objects here that I want to align off of each other, or shapes. So I got my first circle selected. Hold down the Shift key. I can select all the rest of the circles by clicking on each one with my Shift key held down, and then also shift clicking the square. And you can see I've got everything selected because each individual object has its own set of handles. Once everything's selected, then I can go ahead and do my alignments. I'm going to come up here in the Arrange group and click on the Alignment button. It's a little tiny button that you really wouldn't notice. I first want to line everything in the center, and then I'll come back and align everything in the middle. So center puts everything in the center, and then I want to go back and click on the button and align it all in the middle. So that looks fantastic. It's done perfectly, and I didn't have to freehand it, which I'm not as good at it with my mouse, so I'll let Microsoft do it for me. Next thing I want to do is I want to add a star in the middle of my innermost circle. So I'll come back here to Insert, to Shapes, come down here, and we'll do a 5-point star. Click on it. I'll start in the upper left-hand corner, and if I click and drag, I could get kind of an oblong star, but holding down my Shift key gives me the perfect star. So I'm holding the Shift key, and I'm going to stretch it out to about there. Again, I can freehand it, eyeball it, click it, and drag it, and try to center it as best as I can. But if I don't, and I want Microsoft to do it for me, then the star, I want it aligned and centered off of the inner circle here. So the star is already selected. I'll hold down the Shift key and click on the circle behind it, and I'll align both in the center and the middle off of these two shapes selected together. Going back to my Align button and Align Center, and then going down to Align Middle. Looks good. Click off in a blank area to deselect everything because now I want a color, and having things selected like this and starting to click on the bucket to color things, it's not exactly what I want, so I always want to make sure I click off first before I start selecting objects I want to individually manipulate, or in this case color. So the star is going to be yellow. I can come up here in my Shape and Styles, click on this, and I can use different types of shapes and styles here, which is okay. Or I can kick the paint bucket here, and let's say yellow. Gives you the primary colors here, the standard, but if you want more fill colors, you got almost looks like a color wheel here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to it and just use the typical yellow. Oh, it's also shaded too. If I don't want the shadow effects, then I can come up here and click on the shadow effect and say no shadow effect, because that's a residual from the defaults when I was hovering over here and selecting one of their styles. So I went back to no shadow effect. Next thing I want to do is I want to start coloring my circles here. First the outer one. In fact, usually in bullseyes you have every other circle the same color. So my outer one I clicked on. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select the second and select my second circle, which is actually not the circle that's next to the outer circle, but the next one after that. And then I can go ahead and click on the paint bucket. I can do pictures, which would be fun. Click on the picture button and I can select from an array of pictures. Let's do autumn. That looks kind of cool, but I'm going to undo that to show you a few options of things that you can do. Click on the bucket again. I can do gradients. Now if I want more gradients than what they have here, I can select more gradients. And gradients is just basically a selection between two colors that are going to be blending. I mean, I can go back to my one color and just click on the drop down arrow and select it from here. I can do two colors and say I want a blending of, let's say, red for my first color. That looks kind of cool down there, blended with black. Let's go with a nice blue, and there's my most recent color, blue. Or I can do more colors and select that blue right there and click OK. Now as far as the gradient goes, like we've done before, I'm going to choose it from the center and say red's going to be the innermost color, blending out into the second color, blue. So I'll select that variant and click OK. And you can see, at least on the thicker circle here, I'm getting that gradient red here. Not so much so on this one because it's such a thinner circle here. Then I can come in and select the second to the outermost circle, hold down Shift key and select the innermost circle, and then give that some color too, if I wanted. Gosh, if I go ahead and just continue with what I've chosen, it gives me kind of some nice depth there actually. But I could go back to gradient, more gradients, and do two colors again, and this time I could go to red and then maybe black and test it out. Not too bad. Of course the gradient's blending from the red up the top down to black at the bottom instead of like I have with the blue from the red in going to the blue out. I guess that's okay, we'll leave it there. Just don't stare at it too long, otherwise you might get sick. Next, start drawing some arrows pointing into the bullseye here. So to insert the arrows, click on it and click on shapes, and there's my arrow. Click and drag to draw my arrow. Now if my arrow's looking pretty anorexic here or it's drawn out too far, again I can hover over the end handle, the green little circle, and click and drag it in. Get the first arrow just the way I want it here, and maybe we want to be able to make it thicker, so when in doubt right click and format your shape, and then go to your colors and lines tab. It'll go to the most recent tab that you were on, but so I'm going to go to the colors and lines, and so I'd like this to be 5 point. Type in 5 for my weight, the thickness, okay. Everything looks fine, except maybe I want a different color. So I'll click on the drop down, let's do a bright red here and click OK. Kind of shoots in, maybe red doesn't work all that well. I could always have it selected and come up here and click on the drop down arrow and just do black again. That looks fine. If I like it and I want the same arrow but coming from a different angle, you know, same thickness, same color, I can Control C to copy what I have selected. Make sure you select it first and then Control C to copy it, or just come into the Home tab in the clipboard group and do your copy. And then go ahead and Control V as in Victor to paste it, or click on your paste button. And then you can click and drag your arrow down. Use the handle to swing it around, clicking and dragging it and bring it right. Oh, let's say we're not on target for second quarter. We'll say this is first quarter, we're on target, second quarter we're not in sales. So to define what we're talking about here, if we have a presentation to do, I want to insert what they call callouts. Going to my shapes again, and down at the bottom you see my callouts. These little cloud callouts you can barely see are basically thoughts, but if we actually want it to mean something or say something than just thoughts, we'll actually use the rounded callouts. We'll click on it, and then what you want to do is, you're not going to be perfect drawing your shapes at first. I always say click and drag to draw your shape just right off the bat, and then manipulate it after to the way you'd like it. So after I draw my shape, my cursor's already flashing, so I can say January is on target. Let's pretend we're doing it month by month instead of quarter, and then click off. And then what I could do is I can click and drag the border to move it up, and if it's too much text I can click and drag it to move it down, and then this little yellow handle I can move it right just on the tip of the arrow. And of course you can always come in here and change the color of your text, and if you right click it, it brings up your little short toolbar to click on the letter A to change your color of the text, maybe a nice blue. Click off. At the same time you could also click and select the border. Click on the drop down arrow for some styles if you want to change your styles to give it a little bit more of a fun look. You could also right click it and go to Format Auto Shape and then change the color or add fill effects, or heck, even select a picture. Click on the picture, browse through your computer, find a picture that you'd like. I'm going to scroll down through here and see if I can find one. Maybe I'll double click on that one. Click on it, OK, click on it, OK, and well, then I probably want to change my text by clicking and dragging it and right-clicking it and change it to something that's going to be white. There we go. Maybe it stands out just a bit. If I like what I have here and I need another call out for February down below, then just click on it and Control-C to copy it. Now, this one you don't want to Control-V to paste it because it might actually paste it within it. I would say just click off and Control-V as in Victor to paste it. And then click and drag it down. Get it right on target there. And then come in here, select your text, and say this is February is on target. And then, of course, you can stretch it out just a little bit more to make it look nice. Now, the only other thought that I have on this is that if I wanted to move this, the shapes here, down below, because it's too close to the top of the page, I want to move it around. The only problem is if I click and drag, I can only move one shape at a time. So I'm going to click my undo arrow for that. And then what I want to do is I want to select all of the picture here, because that is a picture. In fact, you can see when I click on it, not only do I get my text box controls for the shape, but I also get my picture tool to format my picture as well. So what I want to do is I want to select all of them. To do that, what I'll do is I'll select my first object, and then I can hold down the Shift key and select all my other shapes or objects, including my arrows and my callouts. So now you can see they all have handles around it. Once I'm finished, well, look up here. Now I have 3 contextual tabs because I've got 3 different things going on. I have my drawing tools, okay. That's the shapes that I drew, which is my arrows, my stars, my circles. Then I have my text box tools, which is for the callouts, which means that I can actually type text within a shape here. And then I've got my actual picture tool because I now inserted the picture within a callout. So on all 3 tabs, you can group all of these objects and shapes together. Or when in doubt, you can always right-click and say grouping. You want to group them all together right here. And you see those little squares, how they're overlaying. It just means that you want to combine it all under one. So you can see those 2 little squares, they have only 4 handles around it. It means now that the handles affect both squares because we grouped them together. So you can do it by right-clicking, or you can come up on the Format tab and just look for the 2 squares that say Group to Group or Format text box tools. There's the group, and also for the drawing tools, there's the group. So once I select Group, it groups all together, and now we've got handles on all the objects surrounding all the objects here, and not individually, because I could select them individually, but it's not affecting it on the whole as a group. So when I click on it, I can click and drag it, and it moves everything together. I can copy it, paste it to another Word document, and it would copy and bring everything over. And then I can always get funky with this. I can always do 3D effects. And then I can always color that and rotate it. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel, get notified of the latest videos, and for only $2 a month, you can have access to all my Microsoft Office training videos.